put an end to self-perpetuating rule by a voluntary acceptance of the person who was going to be elected as the flag bearer. Now, why sign an agreement where compliance is voluntary? That should have been a gentleman's agreement. You don't have to sign an agreement if compliance is voluntary, and that is my argument.
And here, I would be willing to give it to Honorable Dr. Ceesay, where it talks about strategy for 2016.
Mbadiŋolu debate dunta siela leader tema anin PDOIS la leader Citizens Alliance la nyatonko Dr. Ismaila Ceesay anin PDOIS la nyatonko Honorable Halifa Sallah. Debate dunte tema ibela kumol fo ibela kumol sata journalistol ye nyinen karol jabi nyin debate aketa Cairo kono Haruna Drame wole debate nyin moderate debate nying na lafta na le dunga kuo kono atata nyadile jumale ganyeta albla noma active tv nganao kibaro janjangalie.
The locations, the design, the materials used, all the way down to the latest details are few of many things that we focused on when we envisioned the airport residency. As proud innovators of community estates, the airport residency in Old Yundum, a project by Swami India International, offers unique gated community with 3 and 4 bedroom villas and duplexes. Just 5 minutes away from the Banjul International Airport. Luxury, convenience, and accessibility are some of the reasons you should consider this great housing opportunity. With a clubhouse, a playground, access roads, and parking facilities available for your dream home or a valuable investment, you will find all you need at Airport Residency here in Old Yundum.
Are you a resident of France or its surrounding countries and still wondering how to send your packages to the Gambia? Or your properties got lost or have delay anytime you send them? French Touch is here to solve your problem. French Touch sends all kinds of goods except what cannot be fit in container. They don't only stop at sending, but they also sell goods like fridge, mattresses, good quality carpets, furniture, and many more.
Inata bullo jora on la karola ufanan kenna ma bewiye simento bije adadi ma na kenna ma nyulu mandanga liyo damba fanana de ikamoto ki anin ka wafi nin dadi ma fanana nyin tuma yesandiro kenyilma ika wafi ma konopal ime batandi dunu sikala ye dokula so do milyan ko sobe yata bake ifon le kela bakaso samba fela la bungo kono French Touch fela sabateri ngale kiti sila balakan gunjur birkama highway ise ka chanyo ya nino ninyin nombala alkami jeskiri.
Hello, wonderful viewers, wonderful subscribers. This is Active TV again for another fast and a quick update. Mbadingulu, mbalbe kontona, mbalbe jala, mbalbe bismillah la kotake. Active TV pour kana kibaro bonde nang kote kami yalonko akabo Gambia banko kang andung abedendinga. Dr. Ismaila Ceesay la aning Honorable Halifa Sallah. Citizens Alliance la nyatonko aning PDOIS la nyatonko. The debate between Honorable Halifa Sallah and Dr. Ismaila Ceesay has ended, and it has ended in peace as both politicians learned from each other. Mbadingolu debate nying abanta Cairo kono. Nying politician fulol ibe karantanyola. In debate kono. No winner in this debate but the Gambia and the Gambian peoples won, as we learned from both Honorable Sallah and Dr. Ismaila Ceesay. In debate de mo manganya nyimmo fulol kono. Gambia banko and Gambia dingol wolle ganyeta katung aketa nyaawo nyandi nyama mbe kuma sotole ko mu yalonko wolen karandi nyimmo fulol la diamo kono. Dr. Ismaila Ceesay aning honorable Halifa Sallah ye kuma kangol le fojang mi yalonko mo jamal nene me moyila woto aketa karandirolti nde Active TV tonya nga kumo dol moy mi yalonko nene mo moy ntulola nyimmo fulola woto kela in debate la moy kula mi yalonko akuma yat nka kuma yata pour moy karang akuanyena. To be honest, this is a very good thing to do because Honorable Sallah has revealed a lot. I mean the vital role the coalition 2016 has played in removing former President Jammeh, the man who was in power for 22 years. Dictator Miyalonko mobe sonda ala dictator yala former President Yahya Abdul Aziz James Yunkun Jammeh coalition ye kato munke pour ka bondi kulam yalonko amantar moy kumbodo coalition 2016 yakata woto kendege but Dr. Ismaila Ceesay atea jelo ko coalition 2016 na kulam yalonko alalo Gambia banko kan imanna ta komi iwututa nyamen wolam ye Gambia nol fele. One thing I really observed very well in this debate is that the confidence of Dr. Ismaila Ceesay. Despite the long debate, the young politician Dr. Ismaila Ceesay still stand on his ground that the coalition 2016 has failed Gambians, and he came with a lot of reasons to defend himself and his words. Mbadimulu Dr. Ismaila Ceesay ala nyindia mo kono kukilimbiye ngo observe kendeke wala ngo koros kendeke. Dr. Ismaila Ceesay ay kumaka mo inform hi alanko ay debate sabu walam kaitandi ko coalition 2016 e Gambianol fele andun debate nyun kono Dr. Ismaila Ceesay ala kuma kama faling abelorin dameng hansaing abelorin wolto angalel ka fole ko self confidence momin lata afanna ilata e kumo mumfo kumo ka sabu yebo dulato ilata munna ilata wala Dr. Ismaila Ceesay awla itandi nyin debate kono. Honorable Halifa Sallah says Dr. Ceesay should not blame the coalition for the failure, but the executive, which is the current Gambia government, the Barrow administration. Mbadiolo, Honorable Halifa Sallah aitandi Dr. Ismaila Ceesay la ko coalition akafo mum felta amanya nakabulo chodi coalition la katung science tende executive Barrow la mansakunda Dr. Ismaila Ceesay aitandala ko Halifa Sallah aitandi ko anyanta bulo chodi la wala la kolmu yalon ko imanta ta ko Gambia banko kan adun Honorable Halifa Sallah han sainde system changing wala ba mutarata bulu pour Gambia ta nyato ako Gambia science teng mbe sulari munna mbe nyi wato munte teng system wala nyanda falina Gambia banko kan bari atama mira ka president do bonde ka president do nat nang wala be Gambia la problemo solve la ñine keta debate mu yalon ko adunta ñiltema ni mu lafta ka full video jibe di debate yeta kerfato waranto Fatu Network waranto Africa TV waranto Gambia Talent TV natata ñindulato albe ñin full debate ñin jibela ila platform to ila media platform beto mi yalon ko wala mi la jaman la bam bantaba balti al comment alia fo nyale mune mira ñilla ñin dibeto. This is all I have for you today. This is Active TV Update.
Each of them, beginning with Dr. Ismaila Ceesay, will have 15 minutes to argue their point. At the end of the 15 minutes, each of them will answer questions for 2 minutes. Each of them can also borrow 2 minutes 3 times. Sometimes you are in the middle of an answer, the 2 minutes is exhausted, but the answer is not quite complete. So they can borrow 2 minutes, but only 3 times during the debate. If they say I borrow 2 minutes, that means they'll have an extension of 2 minutes, once, twice, and 3 times to the end. And we'd like to thank Saul Fraser of Global Properties, but also thank the media in Gambia. When we said, given 2 days, every media house in Gambia is here present today. And this, I think, is the way forward. Dr. Ismaila Ceesay, we will begin with you with your first 15 minutes. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Haruna. Thank you for hosting this very important discussion. Only take this opportunity to thank all media houses present here today for accepting the invitation and willing to join this discussion. I don't think there is any better person than the Honorable to come and discuss and diagnose with precision the coalition. I think everybody knows that Honorable is the architect of the coalition, so I thank him for that. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank him for his leadership during that very difficult period we call the impasse, by instilling hope and holding the fort for the runaway president. Today we're here today to discuss the coalition 2016. I think this is important. The political season has started. In 2016, after many attempts, political parties came together to pool their resources and their energy and their knowledge and their political capital to play the qualifying rounds. They qualified, but could not make it to the final to win the trophy. So therefore, it's important to know why, so that, because every Gambian, most Gambians, are talking about possible coalitions. It's important to know why the 2016 coalition failed, so we can learn lessons and avoid such mistakes in the future. Note that this is not a competition. This is an exchange of ideas. Both myself and the Honorable will learn from each other, and I believe the public watching from home will also learn from us. We will leave this hall today with no victors. I will not be a victor, I will not be vanquished. The Honorable will not be victor or vanquished, but I think every Gambian will be victor today after this event. Political parties should nurture the culture of what I call the 4 C's: to coexist, to consult, to cooperate, and to challenge. But when they challenge each other on the basis of the exchange of ideas, ideas that can help transform this country. This gives voters the opportunity to weigh different solutions to the country's very many complex problems and make informed choices at the polls. So I hope this will be seen as the first of many to take place in this country. I, for one, will not vote for any party whose leader doesn't want to come and face Gambians to tell us how you want to govern the country if you are entrusted. There will be no job for you if you don't want to come for an interview. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2016, in fact, before I go further, I'd like to thank all coalition members, not only the Honorable, for forming a united front in 2016. Their efforts paid somehow, because we are here today in this hall to debate Gambian politics because of the sacrifices they made. So a thank you to all the coalition members. In 2016, opposition parties put their differences aside. They came together and formed a united front to remove Jammeh and initiate reforms that could put this country on a path towards democracy and development, in particular consolidate democracy and also promote the rule of law. To succeed and to achieve their goals, the coalition produced a manifesto promising to implement corrective programs of activities that were very appealing. But even though the coalition succeeded in removing President Jammeh, it is my argument that the second task, which is the most important, was shortcoming and it was a failure. That is, the agenda as published in the coalition manifesto and the reforms they promised to do, they were not successful in doing that. It is also my contention that this was a collective failure of the coalition members. The coalition established 2 documents. I think when you do some research, you'll realize perhaps it's 3. That's what they call a draft MOU, which was not signed. And once it's not signed, it's just a draft, it's just a memorandum. I don't know whether we can call it a memorandum of understanding. I think Honorable can help us with that. That's also called what they call the 17th October Agreement, which was signed, obviously. But also there's what they call the Coalition Manifesto. This was in line, or these instruments, these documents, were established for 2 purposes, or to help the coalition achieve its 2 purposes. The first one was what? To change government through peaceful means. And the second one was to create an enabling environment for elections in a free and fair playing field. So what happened to the agreement? The agreement was fragile from the beginning. For example, there were fundamental provisions in the agreement which states that the person who will be elected as the flag bearer will resign from his or her party. The second one was that the person to be elected will give a commitment to serve for only 3 years and then step down to resignation, after which we will hold elections where she or he will not contest. However, the coalition members did not anticipate a potential breach of agreement and therefore could not create clear statutory or other legal mechanisms to ensure the terms of the agreement were enforceable. Now, the honorable members also did not test the courts to test the limits of our judicial system like Sid Mati and his colleagues are doing, to take Barrow to court for a breach of agreement. Because for me, the agreement was legally binding. It's a written contract, and it's valid and therefore enforceable. It means that when parties sign a written contract, they are expected to fulfill their obligations under it. Now, for a written agreement to be legally binding, it must contain an acceptance of the contract terms in the document. The most common way to achieve this is through a signature. And as far as I know, and as far as I am concerned, and the Honorable can attest to that, President Adama Barrow, with 3 other coalition candidates, those who contested it in the convention, signed this agreement. I read a press release by the party, DOI, on 9 October 2019, which states that, I quote, the strategic objective was to, that is of the coalition, the strategic objective of the coalition was to put an end to self-perpetuating rule by the voluntary acceptance of the coalition-sponsored candidate to serve a 3-year term and preside over a free and fair election in which he or she would not participate or give support to any candidate. Can you please underline in bold, voluntary? Doi is saying that the objective was to put an end to self-perpetuating rule by a voluntary acceptance of the person who was going to be elected as the flag bearer. Now, why sign an agreement where compliance is voluntary. That should have been a gentleman's agreement. In order to sign an agreement, if compliance is voluntary, and that is my argument. In fact, another top coalition member was quoted to say on April 5th that the agreement was a gentleman's agreement, which I also think that was in the case, because the agreement was signed. It means that you give your consent that you will fulfill the obligations of the agreement. Let me hasten to note that nothing was wrong with this clause in the Constitution, that the person to be elected as the flag bearer should resign after 3 years. Nothing is wrong with that. Because why? As in section 63 of the Constitution, it provides for a 5-year term, while section 65 of the same Constitution provides for the resignation of the end, before the end of the 5-year term. So even though you are elected for 5 years, there is nothing wrong in you resigning after 2 weeks or after 5 years or after 3 years. So nothing was wrong with that provision in the agreement. But it was also the responsibility of the coalition members to hold that person to account. But as we all know, no attempt was made by coalition partners, either individually or collectively, to hold him for account for breach of contract or for breach of agreement. Let's briefly look at the agenda, because removing the incumbent was one goal. The most difficult and most important was to govern, to change this country, change the institutions, reform the institutions. In the coalition manifesto, promises were made. They call it the agenda. The agenda was published, and reforms were promised to be implemented on issues such as education, health, governance, economic reforms, human rights, and justice. Now, some of the promises made in the agenda that were seen to be fundamental for the democratization process were not fully implemented. I'll give examples. Number one, the agenda promised that they will establish a body of jurists and competent personalities to review the Constitution with a view to cleansing it of all provisions which are inimical to democracy and the rule of law. What we saw was not that. What we saw was wholesale change of a constitution by spending $116 million, and it didn't get anywhere. But I would also like to give credit to Honorable who raised this issue in Parliament, but he wasn't listened to. The other promise was that in tune with Section 39 of the 97 Constitution,
2
and
minutes,
also
Dr.
Section
Ceesay.
11.
2 minutes.
2 minutes to go.
Yeah.
Of the 15 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, can I borrow my 2 minutes then?
Yes, you can borrow your first 2 minutes now.
Yeah, so okay, then I'll have to move. But there was an agenda which promised to do certain things. Now let's come to why I think the coalition failed to implement the promises they made. One was leadership. The leadership that was provided during the impasse was not matched when it was needed after the impasse. What we saw was that the architect of the coalition, which is the Honorable, he kind of laid back a bit, and that left the coalition void of leadership. And I think every Gambian wants to, if you know, I'll take this opportunity to ask Honorable whether he was offered any cabinet post. I think we all want to know that. But also, if he was offered, why didn't he take it? Why did he opt to go to assembly instead of cabinet? Also, I think the coalition failed to defend the coalition members. Why? Because the coalition give examples. One prominent member was in Dakar and said that he had sacked another prominent member who was the spokesperson. He was sacked as the spokesperson. The other one was what? Another prominent member said that the president should go for 5 years instead of 3, and anybody who doesn't like it should go to the courts, and that was not defended by the coalition members. But also, when the first victim of the president, that is the Minister of Interior, was sacked by the president, the coalition members did not challenge the president to say you are violating the principles of the coalition, which is that you must appoint all 5 ministers in consultation.
Into the borrowed 2 minutes now, sir.
Constitutional coalition executive committee, but that wasn't even set up, and there was also no secretariat. So that was also a problem that happened as well. So the coalition was not defended. So we could see from the onset that there were power struggles within the coalition as well. Also, if we were part of the coalition that we would have had the foresight to plan for a legislative governance framework, which was not there. And it brought the argument of tactical alliance and coalition alliance, which rendered parliament almost in a state whereby it was highly polarized, and today we saw what happened, and one of the victims was the constitution. So finally, every Gambian put their trust in the coalition to change this country. That is why we voted. We exchanged our votes for the promise they gave us, and then every Gambian also took part and helped the coalition that led the crusade. Therefore, collectively we applaud them. But in my opinion, they failed to finish the job, a job that they promised to the Gambian people, and failed to defend and promote the interest of the coalition, and oversights and mistakes led to monumental failures with far-reaching consequences for our democracy. They failed to replace the bad system. They sought to change with a better one, and all the reforms that they promised either were not initiated or they failed. And all members are responsible for this failure in my argument. To move on and to have trust from the population, I think members should acknowledge that there were shortcomings, accept it, accept the weaknesses, take collective responsibility. That is what leaders do. When there is success, they give credit. When there is failure or weakness, they come out and take responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ismaila Ceesay, Citizens Alliance Political Party. Now, Honorable Halifa Sallah will have an opportunity to respond in his view if, in fact, Coalition 2016 have failed the Gambian people, or was the success it was designed to be. Honorable Sallah, the floor is yours.
Every analysis must take context into consideration. You must have the point at issue interrogated, gather the evidence in order to pass judgment. Unfortunately, and maybe the Honorable Dr. Ceesay will clear that point, I don't think he has ever read even the coalition agreement. I may be wrong. But his premise will either indicate that he has not read it or does not want to fully explain its essence. The context. Here is a document called Opposition Parties' Proposals and Demands for Electoral and Constitutional Reform in the Gambia, 7 April 2015. This was sent to the President, to ECOWAS, to all international organizations. After that, on the 20th of July, 2015, the executive came with this act to amend the Elections Act. And Section 43 decided to increase the deposits to 500,000 from 10,000 for presidential candidates, 50,000 against 5,000 for National Assembly members, 50,000 against 2,500 for mayors and chairpersons, and then 10,000 against 1,250 for councillors. 48 constituencies multiplied by the 50,000, you can see that there was a deliberate attempt to make it impossible. The response of the executive was that it will not engage in electoral reform to what Doi proposed in 2015, published in 2015. And here I will be willing to give it to Honorable Dr. Ceesay, where it talks about strategy for 2016. They paid the opposition, and the opposition responded in 2012 by not participating in the elections, National Assembly elections, unless there was electoral reform. Could not remove the government from office by each political party being on its own. The result, 17% for UDP, 11% for the United Front. That was the result of the presidential election, which is what the UDP had in the 2006 presidential election. So we saw electoral reform to be absolute must. We called for it. 2012 National Assembly elections, where you had 48 seats, only 23 seats were contested. And out of those seats, you had result 80, showing that the APRC, regarding the popular vote, did not have that full control of the population. Created numbering about 300 and something thousand, and out of those 300 and something thousand, only 150 something thousand participated in the National Assembly elections. We had 5 people that if we are to participate in the 2016 election, we must insist on electoral reform, failing which we must build a coalition. So essentially, that is history. The leader of the UDP was in prison. Gambians abroad felt that there was no way of changing this country except to overthrow the government. The government had decided that it is the power of the state that will protect it, because as far as electoral contest was rising. And Doi saw the need to implement its tactical objective, to try to build a coalition. I convened a meeting at Kairaba Hotel deliberately, because, well, they are preparing for something else other than election. Because the person who was in power never believed that no right-thinking opposition would ever think that you can remove him through the ballot box.